everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Parry-Cruwys, with another special bonus episode. We were very honored to have a panel at this year's BABAT conference, and it was all on a subject very near and dear to our hearts: dissemination of behavior analysis. Because, hey, what is it that we do except for disseminate research related to behavior analysis every week when we talk about a given topic? So this was a little bit different in that for the first time ever, Jackie, Diana, and I were able to sit down and talk about results related to dissemination that we gathered ourselves through a survey. So a number of people either on our Facebook page or through targeted emails filled out a survey. I think we had over 200 respondents filled out a survey related to how they get continuing education credits, how they prefer to learn more about behavior analysis. And we were able to take these results and share them in a little panel that we called Can You Hear Me Now? And so what you're going to hear next is the audio from that panel. So it's a little bit different than our typical episode, but we thought it would be fun to release this kind of as a fun bonus to sort of hear what we talked about. So without further ado, please pardon any weird audio. It was our first live recording, and I did what I could, and I think it came out okay. But, any weird audio, blame me. On all the great content, then you can blame Diana and Jackie for their great talking. And I was there too, I suppose. All right, without further ado, here's our panel from the BABAT 2018 conference. Can you hear me now?
We're here today to talk about the new directions in our field regarding technology and online resource consumption as it relates to behavior analytic practice. And I am Diana Parry-Cruwys, and with me are my wonderful colleagues and co-hosts, Robert Parry-Cruwys and Jackie MacDonald. And I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves as well and say anything else about yourselves that you want to.
Okay. So hi, I'm Robert Parry-Cruwys. I host the ABA Inside Track podcast, and with my two fabulous co-hosts. I'm only the host for copyright reasons. They do more of the actual work, I think. But yes, that's who I am.
I'm going to stand up so then you can hear me. I'm Jackie MacDonald. I'm the director of the ABA program at Regis, and I like dogs.
Yep. So just as a heads up, we are trying to do a recording of this to release as content, so I don't know whether anything will come through. So if you have secret plans, do not share them because they might get recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, don't talk, I guess. But it's mostly just up here. And hopefully everyone can hear us being as loud as we can be. But let us know if you can't.
Great.
Should we just get right into it? Or do you want to start us? No, okay.
No, I'm good. I already introduced myself, and I work with Jackie at Regis, and I also do this podcast with her too.
So the focus of today's panel on dissemination really came from the work we're doing with the podcast itself. For those of you who have never heard of the show, we started back in 2016. There were only two. We were the second behavior analysis podcast at that time that was consistently recording. We've done about 66 episodes on a variety of topics, and then we sort of do occasional other bonus interviews with folks, or just sort of in between interstitials where we just chat. But every other week we come out with a full-length episode on a given topic, and we look at some research related to that topic. This really stemmed from actually talk that I saw at BABAT, I don't know how many years ago, where there was a reference to Parsons and Reed and the idea of journal clubs being a great way to gather new information and to stay abreast of what's going on in our field. And I said to myself, you know what? I only go to maybe one conference a year. I should probably be reading journal articles more regularly. And wouldn't it be easier, just like with public posting, if I made other people come talk to me, so then I actually have to read the articles because I have to be able to talk about them semi-intelligently. So what I did is I put together a journal club, and the problem we ran into was no one ever had time to get together to meet. So we'd have meetings where there'd be one person or two people. I think the most we ever had was like four. I think we had four at one time. Which
it was awesome. We're like,
great.
Oh my God, Panera! We're coming in!
And
we're taking over with our
But
four
before
people.
that, Rob did this just at work, and he'd be like, oh, I have to stay late for journal club. And I'm like, are you scrapbooking at work? You're journaling? What are you doing? I didn't understand.
No. You hadn't read the article at the time, I don't think.
No.
So that was kind of a sad fact, is that it's hard to get a bunch of people together in one space when it's not a giant conference. And even when I went to the trouble of getting individually ACE approved so I could tell people, totally come, you'll get CEs, still almost nobody would come. And so at this point, I was doing podcasting just for fun because I wanted to learn how microphones worked. And Jackie had mentioned, I had Jackie on as one of my guests because it was a very professional podcast at the time. And she said, we're going to do this for ABA. We're going to do this. We're going to talk about articles. And so we sort of combined the idea that, you know what? People do like to listen to podcasts. It was becoming much more of an accepted form of entertainment, information. I think, this is post-serial, so everyone kind of knew what a podcast was. It was a lot cheaper to buy equipment than it had been a few years before. And so we sort of said, let's combine some of the best parts about podcasting, which is usually that there are people together, they're sort of having a good time talking about a subject. You can feel like you're a member of the group, even though you're not actually physically able to be there.
But you are. We know you.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we know you.
We know you. We see you there.
With the idea of, well, we still want to keep talking about research, and we still want to keep, pushing what we know and the topics that we as behavior analysts feel comfortable talking about. So we kind of shoved them together, and we made our first episode. And so that's kind of the history of where we came from. Now, one of the things...
Did we talk about the goals of our show?
Oh, no, we didn't talk about the goals of our show. So the goals of the show, again, were to... Number one, be informative. We wanted to have a topic, we wanted to discuss actual literature, and we wanted to discuss it in a way that was both interesting for folks who are more interested in the research aspect of, reading an article, what are the pros and cons of the design used, but also practical. So, because a lot of us, myself included, we need this research to be better at our day-to-day jobs. So we wanted to have something that had both interest in talking about research and then interest in the practice of using what you read about. And then hopefully making people more comfortable with the idea of, I have a problem, I'm going to grab a bunch of articles and read them, and I bet I can come up with a treatment or reach out to another professional to learn more. So that was our goal. And then to have a good time, because honestly, no offense to us, but anyone could just sit down and record themselves talking about a journal article. Any of you could do that. So we said, well, we should probably try to be funny or entertaining as well. And hopefully that will differentiate us from, any other podcasts that come along.
Yeah, and I think we wanted people to feel like wouldn't be just the same as reading an article, but they were sitting down with friendly people that they knew, just like an online or a virtual journal club, I guess you could say, right? So it's something that you get to kind of get into the literature a little bit more and think about it in a fun way. And, we've done this now, I don't know, I'm bad at math, for like 2.5 years, I guess. So when we first started, it was just meant to be something fun, and I was like, there's nothing out there. I just wanted to listen to something while I drove around, right? Between my home-based houses that I went to, there wasn't anything out there. So initially I think we thought it could just serve that type of purpose. And then as it's grown, and we've heard from more and more people out there in the field, I think we recognized that, wow, we actually do have a mouthpiece here where we can speak to multiple people. And in that, with what is it? Great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Spider-Man.
You do start to kind of feel the weight of the responsibility side of things too. So I think we've started to think about, the exponential level of growth in our field, the number of young professionals who are out there potentially working in more isolated areas, out there a little bit on their own, and what are the important things that we're just a little podcast, so if they're driving around listening to us, like, what are the important ethical underpinnings of our field that we want to ensure that they're getting to hear and have that reiterated to them too. So, everybody grows up. And here we are. Anything else?
No.
Cool.
So what we'll mostly be talking about for the rest of this panel, and then hopefully getting some feedback from you as well, is this idea of, okay, so we have this little podcast and we have our goals. How much are all the new ways that we can connect online actually affecting how we disseminate information? So I'm going to take kind of a slide from Pat Fryman and try to make a story. I found this graph after we'd already started the process of doing our survey, but let's pretend that I found this first. Look at this. In a different field, in this case, teaching and education, which is a similar field in some ways to behavior analysis, there is an increased focus on individuals using social networks to learn from other people, to use social media to follow other experts. Now, this is positive in that we have more access to people that we used to see as sort of luminaries, like, oh, I'm never going to see that person talk because, oh, they only speak at the best conferences. So we have more access to professionals than we ever had before, but is this always going to be a good thing? And even though this is true for, say, education in this survey, is that true for our field in behavior analysis? So therefore, we said, let's make a survey and let's see what we find.
That's what we did.
And that's what we did. You want to go over the...
Yeah. So we created a survey and sent it out to all of our friends and family. We posted it on Facebook. We posted it on lots of other social media where behavior analysis was present. So if we were part of any of the social media behavior analysis Facebook groups, we sent this survey out asking people to talk about how they're using technology to interact with others in the field, and maybe potentially how they're using that technology to do their job better or worse, right? So who knows? So we sent it out for about a month and a half-ish, maybe a little 2-monthy.
5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, I'm not good with math either. And so we had 212 respondents, and it was really interesting that mostly people were BCBA. So it wasn't surprising, but I thought we might get more students or we might get more people that were RBTs, but it was surprising to me anyway that most of the people were BCBAs. I guess it wasn't surprising to you guys. You were like, oh yeah. But it was surprising to me. So most of the people were 30 to 34, and when I first read this, I was like, oh my God, they're just my age. No, they're not. I haven't been anymore. 34 for like a while. But it was awesome that I was like, wow, they're like my friends. And I was like, no, they are, but they're younger than me. And that was sad for a moment. I was like, oh, I'm getting old. And so then the next realm was 35 to 39-year-olds. That's where I fit. Way to go. Way to represent. Not surprising, the majority of our listeners or that completed this survey are female, since our field is heavily populated with female people. And 67% received certification in the last 5 years. That was a little bit surprising. But yeah, you can.
Yeah, so I highlighted that one for you guys up here on the screen because to me that is a really important and relevant point. So 2/3 of the folks who responded to our survey, so they're not just our listeners, but it's certainly possible that many of them are our listeners, and that's how we, those are the means that we had to reach out to people. And 2/3 of folks have gotten their certification in the last 5 years. And that's maybe a reflection of our particular listenership, but I think it's also a reflection overall of the field as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. So I got my
2006
BCBA in 2006, and you guys know that your number, the number that you have on your BCBA is your number, right? That's the number that you are in the whole world. So I'm number 2,600. The folks who are getting their BCBA right now in 2018 are already in the 30,000s. So that's the exponential level of growth that we've seen within our field, and it truly is exponential. So looking at the graph within the last 5 years, you see a significant number of new BCBAs. And if you guys, maybe you're new BCBAs yourself, or maybe you can think back to when you were a new BCBA, you've taken the courses, you've spent time as a one-to-one most likely, but you don't know everything. There's a lot of questions out there, and you're daily encountering new, potentially scary, potentially ethically complicated scenarios, right? So I think that this is an important point, and one that's not just related to what we're doing here right now, but to our field as a whole. How are we going to ensure that new BCBAs get the additional support and training that they need even after they have that certificate in order to properly provide the types of services that are expected in our field? What else up here?
Most everyone was from the United States, except we had a little contingent from Australia. I think they were our friends that live in Australia. We don't know, but we think that. But then, not surprising also, 80% of the people that responded to the survey also worked with consumers with an autism spectrum diagnosis or other related disabilities, right? So that's not surprising for us. And 50% were in a setting with elementary age students. Everyone else says elementary. I say elementary because there is an A in it, just so you guys know.
Like Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah.
Got it. All right, so moving on from here, we've broken down some of the types of questions that we asked in the context of the survey into different components. We're going to talk about that and then sort of talk about the overarching themes related to these questions. So the first component of the survey was asking folks how are they staying current with the literature, and as well as how are they gaining access to the CEUs that we all need. So those are the first few questions that I have here.
So as you can see from the graph that we have our percentage on the x-axis and our answers on the y, the conference still remains the most popular way to get CEUs, or at least the way most of our respondents said that's how they get their CEUs. That's the green bar at the top. That was followed by online coursework, and that was about 76%. Podcasts came in pretty high. Again, a lot of the people we were, surveying were finding us through social media, which means they probably had some knowledge of, the podcast and therefore listen to the podcast. So that might be skewed a little bit. Webinars came in at about 50%, followed by workshops. And then it sort of dropped a lot from there. Employee-sponsored talks, local speakers, journal articles. As we already talked about, was kind of in the basement. Nobody's really doing the personal journal clubs anymore, I guess.
And also just to note that this question was check all that apply, right? So these don't add up to 100%, in case you were trying to.
Yeah, if you're doing the math,
100%,
yes.
So,
We'll move on to the next.
So the next question was more about how do you prefer to get your CEs? Not how do you do it, but how do you like it? And again, conferences were pretty high, the highest. Podcasts also came out pretty high. And then again, online CEU and workshops. So those were sort of known as the most popular ways to get CEs. And the others fell. The journal clubs, again, really tanking. Nobody likes them, I guess.
7 people like them.
You got to do your brand research before you start your journal club. I could have saved myself a lot of time and effort.
very good.
Next one. And then finally, I'll do this last one, the convenience factor. So this one we expected to see a difference. Conferences, which has reigned supreme for the past 2 questions, was not as convenient as some of the other methods, which, again, we kind of expected, especially say, how fast did BABAT sell out this year? I think anyone who didn't get tickets would feel that this was not as convenient as it could have been in the past. So employee-sponsored events also pretty low. Online CEU workshops and, podcasts came out as the most convenient way, and that makes a lot of sense because you don't have to do much. There's not much response effort. You're probably already sitting at your computer anyway, so hey, might as well just continue sitting there and then earn some CEs because you need them. So there you go. And then where'd Journal Club go in there? Oh, it's still terrible. Nobody likes to go to the Journal Club. I feel so bad. R.I.P. Journal Club. I have a lot of trauma I'm still carrying with me.
It's all coming out now. Yeah, I think another good point to take away from this is that these are respondents from all across the country. We did have a heavy West Coast, East Coast contingent. I didn't throw up the map for you guys, but there are a lot of BCBAs on the West Coast and East Coast, so that makes sense, right? And we're here in New England, and I don't know how far all you guys traveled, but most of us are probably within an hour or 2 of this drive, right? So we got into BABAT. We did it, right? But a lot of people didn't get into BABAT. But even if you didn't get into BABAT, there are other options here in New England, right? Go to New Hampshire, Connecticut, go to Massachusetts, but there's other stuff going on, right? And here in Massachusetts, if you're a LABA, 50% of your CEs need to be on the ground. Did you guys know that? Okay, good. I just learned that. So conferences they're not super convenient for us even, right? Given that we're sort of in a position of privilege here in the Northeast with the most BCBAs in the country. But think about if you're in the middle of the country, you may only have one option for going to a conference, and that may or may not even be practical for you to attend. So we have to think beyond just meeting in person, particularly if you're out there in a more isolated area. What are some other ways to get CEUs? And I think that's why we see the discrepancy here as far as convenience. Yep, going. Okay.
So you want to go? So these are kind of some of the summary.
Summary slide.
You want to take you?
Yeah,
Go for it.
I'll summarize it. So we do know that conference attendance does remain the most popular, with 70% of our respondents choosing that. And we do know that it's not as convenient to go to conferences, right? It's fairly expensive. You have to be away from your house. You have to be away from your family. You have to be away from your jobs, which some people can't do. So we are trying to take into consideration, how can we best support the people that can't be in this room? We just went to a really great talk about looking at people who are in the room and who are not in this room. And there are a lot of people that are not in this room, right? There are a lot of people that can't go to conference, that can't afford to go to conferences. So how can we best give them the information that they're going to need to succeed in order to make our field a lot better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that the point of trying to make sure the field is good across the board, because I'm sure we've all worked with a lot of BCBAs. Some of them we've enjoyed working with. Some of them we have not enjoyed working with. And rather than say, I just won't work with that person anymore, is there a way that we can make sure that they're accessing a lot of this information as well? Because, you know, it's not a closed system of, no, only the good people get to read the research and the rest of you don't get to read it. It's for everyone to, you know, better the field as a whole. Because it only takes, you know, one BCBA who's not following the research to make a family say, ooh, that ABA stuff is not for me. And eventually that is going to, we know, is going to be a problem.
Next slide.
Did we review the challenges of each?
Yeah.
We did.
We did.
We did. Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah. And another thing that we learned was that respondents do prefer those traditional methods of learning, reading journals, attending conferences, and learning from colleagues. But from my own personal experience with talking from BCBAs in the field, sometimes people still find research articles scary, right? You're like, oh, God, like it's black and white, it's like small print, right? Just so you know, if you are a BCBA, you can access Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, Behavioral Interventions in your resource section on the Gateway tab. Not everybody knows that, so that's nice that they finally have done that for us. But even if you do have access to that research, it might be pretty scary for you if you've been out of school for a while, right? So if you haven't had that experience of knowing how to read a research article for a while, getting back into that, just like going back to the gym, is scary, right? They're like, oh my God, are they going to look at me? They haven't seen me in a while, right? So one of the ways that we're trying to...
They're not.
Right? They're not.
No.
Yeah. Right, so one of the ways that we are trying to, you know, change how people think about research is that it doesn't have to be scary, right? It doesn't have to be something that you only do when you're taking classes or that you only do when someone tells you you have to. This should be something exciting and fun for you that you're like, oh, I get to go home and read an article. It's new and I haven't read it yet. So that should be something that we're trying to help promote, that excitement across research, because it is interesting when you understand it. Mm-hmm. Right? But it's that understanding piece that you have to feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. There's some social reinforcement, too. If you pull out a citation rather than, I read somewhere that this treatment works. If you have a citation because you've been reading your journals, you're way up on the research. People, you know, you give you that look of like, oh, ooh, you must be the smartest person here. And that is, you know, that is pretty reinforcing and does kind of keep you saying, you know what, I'm going to keep up this stream. Just like going to the gym. You kind of have to start slow and build your tolerance up.
Right. And so, again, too, with these traditional methods, we may not always have the opportunity to go to journal clubs, even though nobody wants to.
Nobody wants to. Show of hands. Any of you want to go to my journal club?
Only the people that actually went. Raise their hand.
I got some OG people in the front row here.
And so we're trying to think about, as supervisors or as potential supervisors, how can we provide opportunities for professional development for the people that we are supervising if we can't have them attend conferences. So what are some other ways that we can be creative and helping them provide or helping them gain access to the resources that they need in order to be effective employees? Yeah.
Sounds good. So just to point out, this was a different question than what we asked previously. So before we were saying, how do you find CEUs? How do you like to get CEUs? And then these bullet points here are related to how do you stay current in the literature? Mm-hmm. So you see a difference in the answers because reading journals was not a choice previously. You don't just like mail it into Java and be like, I read the whole thing. I want my CEU certificate. That'd be kind of cool. They don't do that. And you know, we also should preface this by saying this is a survey, right? what Bill Ahern always taught me? What does the survey tell you about? Box checking behavior, right? That's all you really learn. So do people read journals to stay current with the literature? Some do. Is it definitely the number one that, like everyone said? I don't know. It's possible, but there's always a grain of salt to take with that too. I will admit, I've been practicing clinician for a long time, and you're busy. You are busy. You're driving around. You're in meetings all the time, and that was how I came to end up doing this, is because I said, I'm just gonna, while I'm driving between these hour-long commute that I have, I'll just find a podcast about behavior analysis and I'll turn it on while I'm driving. And I typed it in, this is back in 2015, and there wasn't any. It's like, what? No one's made one? Well, someone should do that. And then it ended up being me. But even at that point, I wasn't I'm going to go home and read Java tonight with a nice glass of wine. It was I got in 45 minutes right now between houses, how can I take in some literature, right? Yeah. All right, so moving on, those are our questions related to staying current in the literature. How do you get CEUs? The other thing that we wanted to check on for folks is how much support are they getting out there in the Wild West of providing behavior analytics services? And I think that it can vary a lot by region, but we wanted to see, how do people feel, and were they finding connections with people potentially through online communities or technology?
So we found some definite positive trends in that, that most BCBAs who responded weren't really working by themselves. 92% were working with another colleague. And I think it's very important to have someone you can work with or talk to about the research, about problems you're having, asking for support. Some almost half had 2 to 5 colleagues, which was nice to see. The problem I think that came from that is, even though enough people had plenty of colleagues to talk to, they weren't necessarily going to be, say, supervisor level colleagues. And I'm sure all of us remember our very first year as a practicing BCBA, where we done all our supervision meetings and we passed the exam and we went into our job and we realized, I don't actually think I know that much about what I'm supposed to do here. And some of us might have been hired for a job that is not even close to what we thought we were going to be doing when we passed our certification exams. So supervision becomes very important. But according to our respondents, 56% of the folks listening, again, most of whom were BCBAs, almost all of whom were BCBAs, only met with someone who they considered a supervisor every 2 weeks or less, which meant that many people were rarely meeting with a supervisor. In this case, 24% said, I meet with a supervisor or supervisor figure for me once a month. And then 59% said that they really are never in contact with any sort of a mentor or old graduate advisor or their old practicum advisor. And this is really unfortunate because it's hard to learn what you don't know, and you don't necessarily know what you don't know unless you have someone who's been doing this long enough to tell you, hey, guess what? You don't know everything. I think I've seen that on a lot of slides of the presentation, be humble, you don't know everything, be willing to learn. But that's very hard to do when you are just starting a job where you were hired to be the person who knows everything. So we need to be able to reach out to, former supervisors and practicum advisors. Now, the nice thing is all these new technologies might make it easier to do that. We might have moved to another state where we don't have access to our supervisor anymore, but, email is certainly a great way to do it. But you can also, use Skype. You can use Google Hangouts. Do any folks out there have ways that they stay in touch with sort of old supervisors or old practicum advisors? This is the audience participation part of the show.
You just text them?
Just text them. All right.
That's good.
That's a good relationship to have.
Group text. Anybody know the answer to this? Or anybody have some recent research on this?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it should happen,
Yep.
right? You should be able to just text someone. Someone should just be a text away. Right? But it's not the reality for a lot of people that have gone through school, that they can just text someone that they went to school with or their advisor, as we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that's what should happen, right? You should be getting texts from students from 20 years ago being like, hey, what's happening? I need help, right? And if you don't have that, who are you asking help for, right? So there's a lot of people that we've talked to that don't have that person, to email and be like, this is happening and it's a crap show. Like, what do I need to do? And stuff's going down and I don't have any support. So who do I turn to? And that's concerning in our field. When they email us and they're like, hey, help. And we're like, we can't. We don't know you.
Yeah.
I don't know you. Yeah.
Please do not send us your clinical questions. Yeah. We cannot answer them.
Yeah.
Or again, this wasn't necessarily in the survey, but okay, well, so many people, over 50%, aren't talking to a supervisor. Who are they talking to? Hopefully the other BCBA, who hopefully has more experience than they do in that area. But what if you come to a problem that neither of you or anyone in your group has ever dealt with? Ethically, we can't just say, well, I'll find 1 or 2 articles. That should cover it. I'm now the master of this new skill. So we need someone to reach out to. Otherwise, we're going to start reaching out to people just because we need to solve a problem. There's that aversive pressure of you have to help this family, this student, this client. Are we going to reach out to someone who knows behavior analysis or somebody who knows something that isn't behavior analysis but thinks they have the answer? And it can be very alluring to get an answer from someone just to have an answer. And it's hard sometimes to say, even though there's no research to back this up, I don't have anyone else to ask and I've got to do something.
Yeah, for me, these were some of the most surprising results I think that we got on the survey. This part here about supervision, and maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but it was alarming to me that we could have this number of respondents who have only had their BCBA for 4 or 5 years or less, right? Who are saying that they have contact with their supervisor once or twice a month, which is, that's not a lot of contact. I want more. And that they're folks who maybe led them through grad school or mentored them during that time period, they're not reaching out to for support, right? We all need support. This is it's not an easy field. Being just starting out BCBA is a hard job, and we should not feel like we're intended to be out there doing it on our own. So for me, this was kind of tug at my heartstrings a little bit to think that people are potentially out there and not getting good, solid support from those who brought them up into this field.
Do this one, Jackie?
No, sure. So what we found is that our survey respondents said that most of you travel 1+ hours throughout the day. That's a lot of hours that you're traveling, that you could be doing other things, right? Have you ever thought about that when you're driving or sitting in traffic and you're like, man, I could be sleeping, I could be watching my programs, I could be doing
This
work.
is a professional looking group, Jackie. Yeah. I bet they're thinking about the behavior intervention plans they'd rather be writing.
Right, they could also be doing that, right? So how do we overcome this restriction? If we are spending a lot of our day in the car, how can we overcome that and use that time so that we're not feeling like we're wasting our life inside a tiny metal thing, right? I feel this often. And so we thought about what other technology would people use to reach out to someone to have that type of assistance. And a big push last year was teleconferencing at conferences, so like telehealth or teleconferencing. And surprisingly, not many people use it still. So only 15% of our respondents said that they use it for supervising clients. Only 25% use it for supervising trainees, and 24% use it for communicating with their mentor. So we have this available resource that we could use in the car while we're sitting in traffic, or at your desk, or at your house, or when you're by yourself in North Dakota, and there's like a very few BCBAs or support there, but we're not accessing that technology, and why not? Maybe it's because it's expensive, maybe it's because, it's not widely accepted yet. We don't know. So,
and maybe that some people don't actually know that that's something that they could do, or there's a worry about HIPAA or FERPA compliance. That can certainly come into play. We don't want to be using something that isn't secure. Phone call's not necessarily secure, but it's sort of transitory. It kind of goes away when the phone call is over.
No one's tapping your phone.
No one's tapping. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I think it takes a little while to get used to using like Skype or Zoom or something like that, right? Because everyone looks weird in the picture. Like you just have to accept that you're gonna look weird in the picture, and that your face might freeze, and then you're like but it's just like it's happening on the other side too, right? Like it's not a perfect experience for everyone. But when you need to figure something out, like being able to use technology like that versus an email, email, everything gets construed the wrong way, right? Phone calls are pretty good, but being able to see that person on the other side, and if it's someone that if you're like calling your mentor, right, it's like usually going to be an empathetic face there to greet you and to help you through this troubled time that you're having, like that can be really valuable. And not a lot of people seem to be using that, but those who did tell us that they used it, they liked it and they found it effective. So if it's not something that you're using right now, then you might think that you could incorporate it somehow, go for it. The same could be said for your supervisees. So trying to meet up with supervisees can be really challenging. As long as you're doing a video call, then that can count if you're doing it for supervision purposes. And that might be a good strategy too.
A phone call cannot count towards the BACB. Even though it says phone call on the experience tracker, it does not count.
Just a PSA for y'all.
PSA.
Alrighty.
All right.
Alright, so that was our section talking about how can we support folks who maybe don't have as many resources out there on their own. And now we want to talk about more specifically online communities for behavior analysis. We checked in with folks about what communities they were participating in and how they're benefiting from those.
So, you want to see the graph? Do you want to go to the graph? Oh, you want to do this?
I rearranged it.
Oh, you rearranged it. I fell asleep when you did.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I thought this made sense first.
Okay, so let's do that.
Could or should social media replace our traditional methods? This is kind of the big question, because while not many people use telehealth, I'm pretty sure, show of hands, we all use social media in some form or another. How many people out there? Yeah, I know some of you are not raising your hand. I know you use social media. Now, could we use social media for professional purposes? And if so, should we or should we not? What are your thoughts? Just kind of hearing that as an option or as a possible option.
Lots of other fields use like LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
corporate, and that's kind of networking, but
You,
out there already.
You can post resources on LinkedIn. We actually started doing that because it became easy with our web server to say, hey, on LinkedIn, look, here's a new episode about puppies. Is the only one people have been talking to me about this week.
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you start talking about fixing the internet is the implications as far as, HIPAA compliance and all of it, and sussing out, like, using it as a professional resource for, like, dissemination of behavior analysis versus, like, the support for the case reviews or particularly challenging situations. So.
I just think it might be kind of scary if you get like a Facebook message from your supervisor, rather than an email or a phone call. I don't know, it's just...
That's fair.
Yeah.
You might not want to get a Facebook message from your supervisor. Maybe, yeah.
What's the message though? Like, oh, I saw there's a party at your place. I'm coming by. We'll talk research, I swear.
I mean, from a practitioner standpoint, like, I intentionally hide my Facebook account because I don't want my parents finding me on Facebook. So, like, I don't use it for professional purposes at all because it's, first off, I don't want to deal with all the family friend requests and nonsense. But, using it for personal purposes too. Like, and how do you balance the professional versus the personal aspect?
Mm-hmm. Has anyone had any employees or staff members that used their professional, Facebook page to post pictures of their professional selves, professionally working with, say, students who maybe didn't know they were going to be in a picture on Facebook? Does that happen to anybody? I'm not going to narc you out or anything. You just informal conversation. Yeah. Somebody yes. So it's hopefully not that common occurrence, but I'm sure we've all either heard horror stories or been near one of those horror stories. So, we'll get to the graph, but we know that social media is going to be around for at least some time. Common Sense Media just released a report looking at teen social media use. Now we think teens, it's not who's in our survey. As we know, most of the people in our survey were 30 or above. We're about Jackie's age,
They're all my age.
and like early to late 30s. Spanning the whole decade.
Right.
But we know that the next generation of BCBAs, who are now going to be teenagers and in, say, less than 10 years, might be joining us in the field, are growing up with 70% using social media many, many times a day. So 70% reported that they use social media. Again, getting teenagers to respond to some sort of a survey as well as, more box-checking behavior. But, hey, it's the statistic we have right now. And there's a giant increase, significant, I should say, increase to 10% that these teens would rather communicate and meet with people using video communication. And that was up from, I think, it was 4 years ago they last did the survey, from like 4%. So while teenagers, I know older parents are really worried, like, oh, my kid sits in front of the computer, they never see their friends. It's not that bad, at least by their report. But there is an increase where there are teens starting to say, I'd rather just meet online, or can we just get together online? It's possible this trend will continue, so we'll need to be thinking about, okay, what does that mean for a professional field if we have a group who grew up having many, many interactions online? Most of us probably didn't have that many interactions online in terms of, face-to-face. We had more face-to-face than we did sort of social media interactions, but that is shifting.
One nice thing about the future of online communities is that you can reach out to researchers more readily, right? So I fangirl lots of people, and then I feel more comfortable now reaching out to them because they may have a professional page or they may be giving their emails out more readily, and it seems less scary to email them now than ever before. I think like 10 years ago, I never would have emailed anyone ever because, like, how are you going to get their email? Like, how is that even possible? But now it just seems like with these online communities, people in our field that have done a lot of research are commenting and posting and being human people, right? Less than like, and more like normal people that we can then reach out to. I think that's one advantage of this online community is that it gives a common ground for everyone to gain access to the expertise of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Rob wants to see the graph.
I like a graph.
Oh, there it is.
Where'd it go? There it is.
So how do our respondents use the internet right now for professional purposes? So 82%, again, of our respondents said, yes, I do use the internet and social media for professional purposes. They all considered a lot of different things that they gained from that experience. And it is very tiny, so I'll just read my notes over here. A majority of them really liked having access to other BCBAs. So if you don't have a BCBA to work with, well, guess what? You kind of do in terms of these online communities. 50% of people mentioned that they liked having a chance to get ideas about challenging behavior or ideas for addressing skill acquisition. A large percentage, 85%, really liked the ability to get resources and materials. And I think it is nice because how many of you have said when you're writing some sort of complex behavior plan, I know somebody else wrote this exact same plan like 10 minutes ago, but it's taken me hours and hours to like just get the formatting right and write it, in language that the staff will all understand or the teachers I'm consulting to will understand. And you know it's got to exist somewhere. You're reinventing the wheel. Reference to pertinent literature was only about 60%. That seemed a little low, but I think that was more in terms of the asking about literature and getting references to literature that might be relevant to your question. And then almost 40% would look online in their professional communities for answers to ethical questions. But we're going to talk a little bit about while it's nice to have these resources, that's not necessarily, it was kind of a trick question in that some of those things people say I like getting on my online community possibly aren't good for our field as a whole.
Yeah. So before we move on from this slide, I put up some little asterisks next to the ones that Rob just mentioned. They're the lowest percentages here, but they have some little kind of like warning asterisks next to them, which were, are you looking online for ideas regarding specific client recommendations, right? So increasing or decreasing behavior based on what other people are saying on Facebook, and answers to ethical questions as well, right? So you don't know who's out there online. It's supposed to be a group of behavior analysts, but honestly, anyone can join that group. It's not a closed group. And want to be obviously adhering to HIPAA guidelines, but even asking more general questions is a slippery slope, I think, in that you're not contacting the overall literature related to the problem at hand, and you're not discussing it with someone who knows the case. Okay, now.
No. Jaggie's our ethics person, so you should talk about these concerns.
I love ethics. So I find some worrying trends there, right? So imagine, for instance, you are sick, you have the flu, maybe, you're not quite sure.
Get your flu shot.
So you go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, I see all these symptoms that you have. Hold on for a minute. Pulls out his phone, flips up Facebook, and is like, hey, everyone on my community, I have a person in here. She looks like this, and she thinks she has the flu. What do you guys think? And then waits. Like, that's basically what we're doing when... No. Right? That's basically what we're doing when we're using these Facebook posts for ideas about our clients. And I know maybe you're cool with that, but I'm not. Like, and I'm not really cool with my doctor being like, I'm not sure, so I'm going to check the internet, right? I'm going to ask other people. I would rather my doctor ask a trusted colleague or, look it up in the books that they have. They're like big books in the office, right? So
You have a good understanding of how medicine works.
Thank you. I'm very smart in medicine. So that worries me because we don't know if that's the only outlet people are using to ask these questions. And so it makes me nervous as a parent, as a behavior analyst, and as someone that wants our field to do better, that this is potentially a common way that people will find ways to address challenging behavior. It also is fairly worrying to me that people answer these people. So if I say, hey, I have a 4-year-old client who needs to work on manding and has some aggression, what should I do?
DRO.
Right?
It's always a DRO. That most function-based treatment, the DRO.
But right, so then if you look on... Me and the DRO are not friends.
No.
Right, but you look, there's always like, oh, why have you tried this program? Have you tried this? Like you should definitely slap a DRO on it. Like, of course you should. Or do a DRA. Like, there shouldn't be answers there. There shouldn't be answers that are like, you should try this. Because we don't know. We don't know at all what's going on, right? We don't have all of the stimuli in that current environmental context that's going to lead us to a very successful, appropriate treatment. What we should be giving them is access to literature, access to someone that can consult and know all of the history of that case. That makes me so nervous, and every time I see it, I want to be like, no, don't listen to them. Even though they may be right, we don't know. Right? Because we don't know the client, and we don't know the situation, and we don't know both sides of the story. Mm-hmm. So if you are on any of these media sites and Facebook groups, I urge you to start thinking about that and start thinking about who's responding and why are we responding to be helpful, right? But is that actually helpful, or is that actually moving our field in the way that we want it to move, to be evidence-based, successful, empathetic, and understanding.
Mm-hmm. Did folks see John Bailey talk yesterday about his sort of the online ethics? I don't know if any of you gotten a John Bailey ethics email or written to the ethics hotline before. I did this year. It was amazing. I still have the email response in my inbox. It was very, very amazing. The way that he described that lady with the blue, I'm going to buy the blue light coverings, that was sort of how you want to address those concerns, not with, they don't work, or they might work, or, oh, I've used them before. This is my anecdotal experience. You really want to be talking about, okay, what is the information that you yourself need to find? So here are resources that might help you. Here are ways that you could test and answer your own question. Because it's as much as our job is to answer questions quickly and solve problems, we need to know when it's time to solve a problem immediately, which is with a client we are actually contracted to work with, and it's time to just kind of guide other practitioners as to where could you find your own answers. Because not only is that much more ethical response, because you are not trying to engage in a relationship that you don't really have, even though it seems like you do from social media, but also to teach skills in how to find one's own answers. Because again, a lot of BCBAs might not have that supervision. I mean, as we saw in the survey, there are a lot of folks who just don't have that regular supervision where they'd be getting told that all the time. So we kind of have to become, almost like a mini little friendly supervisor ourselves.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? It's easy. It's so easy to look online. It's so easy to write it and be like, somebody will give me the answer. Just wait 15 minutes. There's a lot of people in this group. I'm going to get some good stuff and then go, right? They may have limited resources. They may have limited time. It's pretty easy, but it might not be the best long term for our clients and for our field.
So hopefully we haven't convinced all of you that everything online, technology, and podcast related is bad.
Certainly not podcast related. That is the best way to get your CEs.
We did find some positive outcomes related to the use of technology in online communities, maybe just podcasts. In that, of our respondents, 68% felt more connected to the field by listening to any podcast, not just us. And 66% were not having trouble gaining their CEUs that they needed. That does still leave a third of folks who said that they were having trouble gaining CEUs, but we're going to put it in the positive column. The world is changing fast. We know all about operant behavior and operant contingencies, right? But we can't forget about cultural contingencies too, and thinking about the directions that our field is moving in very rapidly with a whole new crew of BCBAs on board. And I think, as the oldies now, we can't just say, well, that's not how things are, or that's not how things work, that's not how I learned it, right? Because there's a lot of young folks who are part of our community and our field now who may have learned something different or may not have the same contingencies in place maintaining their behavior. And it's just something good to think about. Mm-hmm. I know we're almost out of time, and it's definitely lunchtime, but if anyone has any questions, we would be happy to entertain them for 2 minutes. Yes.
I actually would be interested, I don't know if any of the survey even got at this question, but what experiences are with online BCBA coursework and credentialing versus in person, because there have been a surge in, we now offer an online master's course sequence. And I have sort of found through my own practice that when they have face-to-face with their professors, in person, face-to-face, I am so much more readily going to engage in my own sort of fieldwork supervision with them, because there seems to be, to me, from my perspective, a discrepancy in the grasp of the material, but also being able to contact other professionals to sort of help supplement the supervision component. Did any of the survey sort of get at that, or?
We didn't ask the question of where everyone got their training, or we didn't ask about that specifically, but I think it's a good question, and it's going to come back to the quality, right, of the types of interactions that you can produce within your training system, whether that's in person or online. And I don't think either is exclusionary from having that type of quality, but it should be at the forefront of planning for the graduate student's experience, is my take.
All right, so we'll be around a couple of minutes if people want to talk more, but we want to say thank you all so very much for coming. Don't forget to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or the BABAT survey thing. All right? Thank you all.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this special bonus presentation of our first ever panel in which we were billed anywhere as ABA Inside Track. Thanks so much to BABAT and all the organizers for putting on such a great conference yet again, and for giving us the time to share our results. Thanks very much to everyone who filled out the survey. And of course, big thank yous to everybody who came to view the panel. It meant so very much to have people in the audience who were there to see us and to share their thoughts and to talk with us afterwards. So thank you so very much for coming. Now, regularly, when we're not doing these bonus episodes, ABA Inside Track's a bi-weekly podcast where we talk about a given topic in behavior analysis and then share some research related to that topic. So if you like this bonus episode, well, you're going to love our full-length episodes. Those come out every other week, and in between we do little preview episodes where we share what we'll be talking about as well as some content from our community. If you like the show, please think about subscribing to us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can also find us all over social media as ABA Inside Track. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. And if you just feel like writing us a line and you don't feel like writing us a review on iTunes or whatnot, well, feel free to email us at any time at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. As you're listening to this, we probably already have another full-length episode somewhere out there. So until you download that one, keep responding. Bye!